All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Masters of Data podcast. I'm Adam White, Senior Director of Technical Marketing. I have with me David Gervin and our special guest today, Roland Palmer. Roland, so great to have you on the podcast.
It's great to be here, Adam, David. Always great to see you folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're talking about hopefully a subject that we can make fun, and the reason that we're having this conversation is because so many businesses are heading into budget season. They're having these deeper conversations about what they're trying to accomplish in 2026 and how they go about doing that. And that always requires, money, people, some combination of money and people and tooling. And so the topic of today's podcast is how to defend your budget. And Roland, in your role, you have to do this constantly, it seems like, and we've had some good conversations kind of leading up to this. But one of the things that you said that was really poignant and I think will resonate with a lot of people is that only finance has a budget season. Everyone else just has a financial year where they are, working to again plan, make their plans for the future. Talk about that dynamic a little bit, if you will, and kind of how you've seen that play out in your current role and in your career in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Budget planning versus a strategic financial year. The reason why I delineate the two is because Q4, late Q3, Q4, most office of the chief financial officer, they start going into the next fiscal year budget planning. Whereas any type of practitioner or strategist for anyone trying to get funding, and I don't want to limit this to IT and security, I'd say anyone who's trying to trying to get funding starts the beginning of the previous fiscal year. And we're talking
Yeah.
about, for us, February 1, I start thinking about, February 1 of the following year. And the reason being is because there's conversations you have to have, there's relationship management that you have to have, and there's consideration and communication that you have to have through that pipeline leading up to finances budget season. So you're prepared to say, hey, I told you this, you've heard about this, you're familiar with these things. Now it's time to, pay the piper, so to speak, so we can help protect in my situation and secure the business.
Yeah. What do some of those proof points kind of look like for you, Roland? Is it, I mean, obviously you try to be data driven, I'm sure, in everything that you do. Kind of what does that look like? And I know in some conversations that I've had with you before, you've talked about kind of like, okay, what does the board care about? How do things kind of roll through the business from that perspective? Like, what does that dynamic look like?
So I think it's important, whether you're new to the business or you've been with the business for a while, is to stay in. I'm going to keep saying the office of the CFO because it's not just the
Mhm.
CFO, it's that entire organization that you have to be in tune with. But I think it's really important to understand where money's spent. Obviously, again, I'm going to talk about security. If I understand where money's spent, it gives me a good lens to think about what needs to be secure as well. If we're spending a lot of money in applications, clearly I need to talk to IT, saying, hey, what's being purchased, so on and so forth. But in the same breath, if I understand what the CFO cares about, and they've helped me deconstruct how I think about security and how it relates to budget, then the conversations get easier. We talk about that communication with any relationship. I get to say, hey, this is what's valuable to the business based off their perception. I get to say what's valuable to security, again, based off their perception and their perspective. And if I marry those three things together and stay in constant communication, it makes that whole process, that financial year, a lot easier. And then that continuous maintenance of the conversation. Remember when you said this was important to you, this is how we're protecting you, and this is how we're using what is protecting you. And I do that time over time, quarter over quarter with everyone in that office of the CFO.
Yeah.
I think Roland just hit something there though that's what's really separates like good security leaders from the rest of them. Uh, and that's he's understanding like the communication level for different personas in the company and understanding what their goals are. So if you're speaking to your CFO or their staff and you realize what their goals are and you speak the same language and you're kind of sharing this common ground where you're both winning on goals, you're going to be so much more successful than if you're just like, I need this tool. or you're just speaking nerd to them. Personally, I think blackmail is much more efficient than any of this, relationship building stuff. But, that's
Just
also why
cuts
I'm
through
a
things,
security
David,
leader.
right? Faster
Yeah,
results. Is
just
that,
faster.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
man of efficiency.
sure, sure. That makes sense. Um, so Roland, I would imagine, as you're thinking through these things, especially kind of that board of directors trickle down, if you will, it's kind of like what if our customers are at risk? Can we respond? Can we respond effectively and quickly? Are we secure enough to grow and scale? Like what are our biggest risks? Like I would imagine something like those four things are top of mind as you go from like what does the board want to do to like an actual plan that you're asking, for money to help defend.
Yeah, absolutely. And great call out on those four questions. I believe that those generically, those four questions can help those bookends, the bookends being, again, that office of the CFO talking budget, and then that board talking about risk and responsibility. I think
Yeah.
having those bookends helps create, again, a tune, a harmonic resonance across the business that says, hey, we're just giving you valet keys to operate, right? Not to go too crazy. You don't want to go 120 miles an hour. I just want you to go 25 to get to the parking garage. Um,
Yeah.
Having the CFO on board and having the board on board and having a CFO partner as you talk to the board and vice versa is extremely important. And those four questions, deconstructing those with the office of the CFO, again, talking about what they consider is important, and then marrying that to, hey, are our customers at risk? To your point, can we respond? What's our biggest risk? And are we secure enough to scale and grow? If I understand how they think, they understand how I think, we can both, I have a partner in the boardroom to talk to the board saying, hey, this is how we think about this conversation, and this is how we intend to secure the business from both a financial and security perspective.
I
Yeah.
think I think there's a really good story to tell here about maybe the side of the house. Let's say you're a security leader, but you suck at this. You need to go grab one of the sales guys on your team because like Roland's just doing a master class in inside sales right now. And if you're doing sales and you realize like one of your, executive summary things, you're literally just taking what they said was important to you at the beginning of that sales POV or whatever you're working on, and then re-saying what they said with the proof that you can do it. That's all it is. It's the exact same thing he's talking here. You're reassuring and giving comfortable, goal setting that they gave you so they feel like oh, you're so great. Thanks for giving me these wonderful ideas, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's a lot of guys who fail at winning budget out there. And like I've said this 1,000 times, but they need to go grab their best sales guy and ask them how they get stuff done.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought for sure on the sales front. Roland, have you ever done so? I mean, what is your interaction with maybe like the go-to-market side on that front? Is that something you've done personally?
I haven't done it personally, but I've had access to great minds like David's mind and great minds like our sales team, our go-to-market team, and being on customer calls. You see the investment and everything David just talked about. You see how they
Yeah.
communicate with their customers. And to his point, although our finance department isn't our customer, they're the ones who approve the budget. Just like if whether we were selling a product, our board is our customer. So
Yeah.
making sure that we have that marriage of, hey, this is the check that's being signed and this is the value back to the board. And again, vice versa. It makes the conversation a hell of a lot easier when we're talking about mutual understanding on how we're going to deliver value back to the business and not just be the proverbial cost center that
Yeah.
everyone in security is.
It also sets goals and it keeps people from moving goalposts.
Yeah.
So I think that's like super important, especially when you're dealing with board. Not saying boards are all hard to deal with. But what I am saying is sometimes, especially if they're working with multiple companies, I've been in a situation where you're going in front of and you have VC or someone like there. They almost forget what they said last time to you. They have a couple of chicken scratch notes and kind of, so if you're like setting up something that's going to be a big hit, it's a budget, but you can prove that you're reducing risk. If you can use their words, it reassures them. They're like, "Oh yeah, I'm smart. I'm the VC guy." So, he said what I said, so he's smart.
Everybody wants things to be their idea, right?
Exactly.
But no, that's yeah, that's a good thought for sure. Um, Roland, there's kind of this Venn diagram as well, or I mean, I guess another way of saying it is like a push and pull in a business of, FP&A and finance in general, protecting the bottom line. There's a security element of like, what if we have a breach? How are we able to respond? What is the reputational damage, or what does a catastrophe look like, and how do we kind of balance that like IT security, finance Venn diagram? Thoughts that you have on that front, I think would be super interesting for our listeners.
Yeah, I think we have to be really clear about something. And for us, that's a product-centric organization talking about Sumo. Um, we can't forget that in most product-driven organizations, that there's two organizations outside of that product organization that can absolutely destroy the company. That's
Mm.
finance, misusing funds, or mismanaging funds, security, allowing a breach. And they shouldn't be diabolically opposed. They should be, to use your phrase, in lockstep with each other. But that's tenuous at best a lot of times because there's some, conflicting points of view. So that push
Yeah,
pull that we talk about can often be solved by communication and honesty. An example of that is, there's some thought out there that when you ask for budget, that there's a 20% uplift. So when they trim, you're 30% below, and they kind of do that push-pull math to make sure that they can achieve close to their budget. But what I believe is that the maintenance activity of that relationship with our office of the CFO should be, hey, just so you know, I purchased this application. It's not returning value back to the organization based on the licensing that we had. I'm going to sunset this thing. You don't have to ask me to. I'm going to. And that's in the back of your mind. You're knowing that they're going to challenge you anyway come their budget season. But staying proactive ahead of that, saying, hey, I missed this one. We weren't ready. We weren't prepared. But there's other ways that you or I could better use these funds. And that kind of alleviates some of that push pull if you have a degree of honesty and true communication with your office of the CFO.
yeah. Do you build in? I mean, it's probably less of a concept these days, but is there any buffer to your budget when you build it in, or are you pretty like, I'm going to do this and this and this, and it's going to cost this and this and this, and if something comes up throughout the year, let's talk about it next year. Like, what's some of that dynamic that you've seen?
I lead with there's no buffer. I'm trying to get to the penny.
Yeah,
Again, I'm trying to be a good, steward, so to speak, of the
sure.
dollars and show them how I operate. Again, this is all an attempt to communicate and make the process easier. And if they understand that, I could blow Sumo Logic out and ingest every log possible. And
Mhm.
then, it costs Sumo Logic a bunch of money. But instead, we have a log management strategy like most companies do. We think about everything we ingest. And much like I just said, for all the tool selection, when we make a poor decision, or if we're underutilizing a tool, or if it's not returning value that I promised, I'm having a conversation with that office saying, hey, missed the mark here. We can better utilize this, but I'm staying as close to the penny as possible. So they show that I'm proactively thinking about budget the same way they are.
Yeah, David, I saw you smile on the ingest front.
Oh, it's just, like I think when people don't really understand maybe their attack surface and what their company does on a deep level, they either blow out their log budget and import everything they can, or they don't bring in anything because they don't think it's important. So it just makes me laugh because there's those situations where you're dealing with that so much and just trying to understand the depth of modern SaaS world is a tricky one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But one thing that did catch my ear there that I thought about as well is Roland's talking about building this um, trust relationship with the CFO. And I think in a lot of toxic corporate cultures, this is really, really tricky to do because you have to admit when you screw up. And sometimes things are an experiment. You didn't necessarily screw up. I've bought software where we needed to try to see if we could do it, and it just wasn't working for our team. But there's this decision you have to make where you're going to be proactive in owning your mistakes and like actual having real leadership, in my opinion, which is to call the guy that gives you money and being like, hey, that $200,000 software sucks. And it was my fault. It looked great in the POV. We thought it was going to work well, but it did not implement well with our systems at all. I got lied to by a shitty sales guy, whatever. And then that's scary though, especially, I feel like when you get above director and you're in VP to C-suite, it's like things get kind of cutthroat. Everybody, there's not a lot of room to grow in those positions. So having that relationship where you can be honest and own your failures is like that's a special place to be in a company, I feel like.
Yeah, that's a good point. Roland, I know, this is not something we ever like to think about exactly, but breaches, security incidents are going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when, So some on like the incident response side, I know from a tooling perspective, you need to know what's happening. You need to see what's going on in your environment. Make sure you can respond. Talk about some of those kind of dynamics of like having enough to know when something goes wrong or is going wrong, but again, not just kind of blowing out the budget and getting every tool in the world to try and stave off the inevitable.
That's a great question and comment. I'm going to lean forward a little bit on this one because it's in my years of doing security, in every investigation incident I've been in, there has always been a tool that would have made it easier. But that's easy to think about inside of a or after in a postmortem.
Like
That's
in
easy to think
hindsight as well. Yeah.
absolutely. But the truth of the matter is there's other things that don't cost money that you could have done to perhaps prevent or capture, react, proactively do that. Again, it's a conversation with the budget office to say, hey, we're doing these things. We're going to be a little bit in delay, or this is how we're going to react to this subset of things that you can do. And for example, an incident where you have keys just floating around in your code repo. There's things out there that you can find that can solve the problem. Or you can have a policy, an administrative, mechanism in place that says we're not going to have keys and code in any way. We're going to have roles or whatever. Just have a dynamic policy in place, and then a technological reinforcement inside of that code repo, which the GitHubs of the world, they absolutely offer these things. So that technical control against that administrative policy prevents you from having to purchase something. You're like, oh, we just had this incident or this event or investigation. Hey, Office of the CFO, I want to purchase a $500,000 tool because we had this incident or investigation. I think that's bad business. I think a better conversation's had with, hey, we had this situation. Yes, this tool could have solved it, but in hindsight, there's some things that I could have done better. And I need to get back with you and making sure that our crown jewels of what we're trying to protect are wholly protected by the technical controls that we have in place and the associated administrative policy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Go ahead, David.
I was just gonna say he hit the nail on the head there with so much of security is policy.
Hmm.
And you can't just use generic policy. You have to understand your environment and what you're trying to protect, like you said there. And post-mortem, like after a breach or an incident, is such a good time to sit down and do some threat modeling, some tabletop exercises, instead of just being like, oh, well, they found a key, blah, 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 blah. We'll just, slap generic policy or slap generic thing on there. Like sitting down and bringing in, obviously your smart security people, but maybe a couple of other people that aren't on the security team, like a dev manager, and even someone I've brought in people from finance for threat modeling workshops before because they have a different view on things, right? But that stuff, I mean, obviously it costs you money and man hours. Everything costs money. But it's so much smarter than a knee-jerk reaction to a $500,000 tool because you don't want to lose your job. And
Right.
that's the other thing is a lot of CISOs like breaches happen. They're trying to figure out something to blame it on. So they're like, oh, it's because we didn't have this tool. That's why it happened. The main time they've had the same SIM for 8 years and haven't actually hooked logging up yet. So, we don't want to go there.
I do though, Roland, love the idea that, in kind of a post-mortem, the default question doesn't just need to be, okay, what tool didn't we have that would have, prevented this or made it, made us understand it faster. That's certainly one element, but it's also how can we change our behaviors, our policies, our, what conditions did we create through our behaviors or our lack of policy that we can tighten up that would have an impact, instead of just like throwing dollars at a problem, which almost no one gets to do, right? I mean, I think that's something we should say as well is like the largest organizations in the world still have gates and mechanisms to acquire, new technology. And it's just to your point of being a good steward of money, Roland, like how can we change what we do as opposed to just kind of like this endless, checkbook, which again is not a reality for most organizations.
No, absolutely. And then having that office of the CFO inside of that postmortem so they can
Yes.
hear that activity makes it even more available to them to keep in back of their mind for future conversations. Hey, we don't have to tighten the security belt. That security belt's already tight enough.
Yeah.
Let's help them out.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and if you think about it, the times that you do see them give the open checkbook, it's usually because they're public. They're trying to bring their stock price back up post breach, right? So I don't know, like an F5 or one of the big breaches. And the funny thing is that when it's like when they do give you that open checkbook and you're trying to fix everything, it's not the tooling that's the problem in those situations. Sometimes it is the tooling, like you're really restrained and you can't afford, endpoint or whatever. But when they give you an open checkbook and you already have a 10 or 20 million dollar security budget and they're like, make it 50, we don't care. We have to get stocks. It's usually the policy and the process and the security culture is so bad in those companies, that's never going to fix it. You're literally going to have to social engineer a complete new culture into the company and go by and break down the silos and fix all of the policy, which in my opinion is a hell of a lot harder work than spending $20 million on tools. So.
Yeah, that quote unquote blessing too could be a curse because imagine what results they'll expect for that money that they're invest. My dog just barged her way in.
Awesome. That's
Um,
awesome.
hey, get it out first. Um, they're expecting incredible results from that money that they're just throwing at you, so maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not,
Yeah, and Adam, to David's point, just because you have a new tool, it doesn't necessarily mean the problem is solved. It just means
Yeah,
now you have a tool that can do a thing that perhaps can catch it or can perhaps prevent it, but you still have the
right.
people problem and the policy problem potentially.
Yeah,
It's left
you've
unsolved.
done nothing. Yeah, as far as that's concerned.
Security will always be a culture problem. Like, I don't care because everything attacks are always going to shift, especially with AI and everything else. Security is always going to be a culture and people issue. And unfortunately, we've hired a lot of CISOs that aren't good with either of those in this industry. There's some amazing ones out there, and Roland's, an amazing guy with both of those things. But yeah, it's a really tricky thing, and I think people are very confused on what security leaders should be like. They think of the guys that are like, well, I was a pen tester for 7 years and then I worked in GRC, so I am going to be great at this. And those people sometimes are, but sometimes they're just horrible leaders. They don't portray culture. Like, I will die on this hill that security should be the coolest team in the company and everybody should love them. And that's just how it should be.
I don't
But
know
yeah.
about you, Roland, but I vote for a montage of David's impressions of different like IT personas. Like,
Listen,
What do you
I'm all in
expect?
for it.
What do you expect, man? I am a blue collar ship, captain, driver, captain, boat captain, and welder that got thrown into the tech world. I can't help it. It was very shocking for me to have people pushing their glasses up at me and calling me stupid.
we also needed a David Gervin lore episode of all the things you've done in your life. It's unreal.
The
Uh,
weirdness.
Roland, it wouldn't be a podcast discussion in 2025 if we didn't talk about AI in some way, shape, or form. So, how do you, I mean, maybe AI could tell you how best to spend your budget. I don't know. That's a different, probably podcast. But how do you see the role of AI in budgets? And are any of the AI solutions or capabilities that are being brought in technology that you're using impacting budget in any meaningful way for you right now? Like not necessarily talking about like FTE reduction or anything like that, just kind of like able to do, more, a little bit more with a little bit less, or, any of those things that would have an actual budget impact.
This
Or
is going
just
to be
spending more on AI and it's actually causing budgets to go up. I don't know.
Adam. I think you just triggered a hot take. So here we go.
We're,
Um,
we're so ready.
I I believe that those who are patient with the delivery of AI and thoughtful about what its current capabilities are will deliver the best value back to the customers that it intends to sell to. And the reason I say that is because the gold rush, so to speak, of AI created these hasty, um, I mean, market flood of it can do this. Sure, and so can ChatGPT. I don't have to buy your product. I just have to use ChatGPT and get the same value for
Yeah.
20 bucks a month. Um, but I think those who, again, are thoughtful about it and leverage its capability with an already good product is going to be able to deliver um, significant strides, longer strides than what we have out there now. And I think we'll see a fast valley behind the peak that we're at now, or
Hmm.
the precipice that we're trending towards now. There'll be a fast valley of, hey, there's a filter of who's returning value and who's not. As far as, you know, replacing FTEs or, supplementing or complementing, what I believe is that in its current state, AI just shifts the responsibility down the line. So although it may be able to solve for, level one or tier one, tier three, however, the lowest level analyst that you have, it may be able to solve for them temporarily, but that's just going to shift the responsibility of that human in the loop down to that tier two. It's not going to
Yeah.
change their life. You're still going to need that support because now they have more alerts coming into that tier two to be triaged rather than sitting with that L1. And that's
Yeah.
that's just me saying that we're not quite, I don't believe we're quite there yet. It's absolutely incredible for some of the efficiencies if you want to reply to email, if you want to aggregate some logs really fast or develop a query. But that's commonplace with most co-pilots out there. But again, those who are more thoughtful about it, I think will deliver more value. And I'm shameless plug, but I'm deeply excited about the AI capabilities that Sumo Logic is coming through with in the near future. And I'm
Yeah.
very, very patient and excited to put my fingers on keyboards and revert
Mhm.
back to my analyst days. So
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think
think. Oh, sorry, Adam.
I was just going to say real quick, one of the things that you said, the patience, it's kind of like expectation setting, I believe is a real key to happiness in life. It's like, what do you expect something to do, and make sure your expectations are aligned with reality. And then you'll be a lot more just content with the outcome and the pace of innovation, as opposed to, buying into all the marketing hype of half-baked things that, are in the market right now, and then kind of being let down continually. It's like, this is a good thing. It's building quickly, but don't expect too much out of it, in the short to medium term. It's going to be amazing in the medium to long term.
I agree. And to your point, I get a honey-do list every weekend. And the first conversation I have of the 45 items I'm supposed to take care of, you're gonna get two. So
Yeah.
choose what's valuable to you. And if you don't want
Yeah.
it done, we need to move on to something.
Triage these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, something that I think you're starting to see more. Like in the beginning, everybody's just slapping basically exactly what Roland said. They're just hooking ChatGPT up to things. And I've kind of been through this with my own side stuff, and it's where AI's capability is, we still can fine tune pretty good right now, but it's still people building things for those they don't know. And this is, I never really understood this deeply until I moved away from the security side of the house, but there's a massive disconnect in security companies and what their customers actually do. Like the workflows and the detailed work and stuff. And I know that sounds weird because there's people in those companies that know those things, but you know, do all the developers understand it? Do they understand, like, they're working on this little spot in the app, what it actually does in that person's day-to-day workflow? And I think that's something people are trying to, as I always say, we're going to polish this turd with the AI on it, and it's going to be a better turd. If you don't fix those workflows and you don't make them geared towards the customer with AI as like an enhancer, as a force multiplier, it doesn't matter. And I think we're in this weird place right now where you're seeing some really innovative tools come out that still don't do the job correctly because the workflow aspect, like the actual what the tool should have been doing, wasn't right from the first part. And I'm really excited to see when people actually fix those workflows because then we're in a force multiplier where you still have to have man in the middle, right? You still have to have someone supervising, but you're gonna get so much more work done. That's I'm really hoping we're going to start seeing that soon. I know we're trying to work on that on a very deep level, so it's exciting.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all masters of the data, and I think, David, again, to your point, these companies who are coming out with the AI have a lack of data problem in that either they don't have security practitioners talking about security specifically. They don't have security practitioners helping in the development and engineering of it, or they don't have a big enough data set to make it valuable to a security practitioner. So, absent those two things, when you have these, um, I'm sure again these great startups, they're still missing data that's going to make it valuable to them. Where you have the larger companies who are going to have a bit of an advantage once they catch up from the agility that a startup has. When they get to a nice stride, they'll be able to make it up because they have those data sets available to help. They have the in-house professionals that help develop and use the product the real way.
I mean, that's why our VP of AI is here. He said I
Yeah,
went where the most data was, and you guys had all of it. I was like, that's cool. That was literally what he told me the first time I met him. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
I'm excited to see what they do because my the stuff I've built is literally just good workflows with ChatGPT and then like really fine-tuning RAG to try to make things accurate. I
yeah,
mean, it doesn't have to be ChatGPT, it could be Claude, it could be whatever. But I think we're going to see some of these guys who are on a different level that have these giant data sets. We're going to start seeing something different soon. I think within the next year.
agreed.
Well, one thing's for sure, people are throwing a lot of budget at AI these days. So it'll be interesting to see, to your point, Roland, if we're at a peak and people kind of if there's a little bit of a valley of expectations or just kind of coming down from this high that we're on right now, like how we come back up to like, all right, this is the value that we all expect. This is, the value that people believe AI is going to drive. And then, yeah, there are some super exciting things in the future for AI for sure, though.
Well, since we're talking about AI and budget and you're my boss, and now I'm in marketing and security and engineer, I don't know what I do still.
Right.
I think that I need some sort of like AI, what do they call them? That makes you not look like shit. I
Like a
need,
filter?
yeah, I need some filters so I look better because we're supposed to be beautiful and on a podcast.
You look beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful enough,
Oh, okay.
like
I was
a
just fishing for
budget
compliments.
wise, right? Like you're getting the job done. So,
I was just fishing for compliments.
you look great, David.
Thanks.
Uh, Roland, thank you so much for taking this time with us today on the podcast. We've been looking forward to chatting with you, and thanks again for your insights and expertise. Really appreciate it.
No, I had a blast, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already to Masters of Data, and we'll see you on the next episode.